Eat a healthy diet. Doctors say it all the time. But if you can't decipher a food label, this easy advice to give is very difficult to follow. So in this video, we're going to crack the code to the nutrition label. Many people don't have the time or the energy to read food labels, but if you plan to follow a specific diet, it's the only way that you're going to be able to. So let's look at this basic food label. It's broken into three parts. The first is the most often overlooked, and that's the serving size. And it's so important because if you aren't following the suggested serving size, you have to adjust everything else that follows. Typical serving sizes are an ounce or a cup, which seems pretty arbitrary. And unless you have a kitchen scale and extra time on your hands, you can't really make much sense of it. Increasingly, food manufacturers are actually presenting a recommended serving in realistic terms, like 11 chips. But this shows that the real serving size is probably not very realistic at all. So let's be real. If you're more likely going to be eating 22 chips, well, then you've got to double everything that comes downward after the carbohydrates, the sodium, and the saturated fat. Also, check out the servings per container. If it says 2.5, well, who's really holding on to a half serving of chips? Food manufacturers adjust their suggested serving downward so that it reflects the numbers that you would like to see, but they actually give you 2.5 servings because they know that that's what you'll crave. So don't make the mistake that there's only 300 calories in this container. In actuality, there's well over 1,000. And ultimately, what you're probably forced to do is to get that kitchen scale and to get those measuring cups and actually acquaint yourself with what a suggested serving is, and then see how much you usually eat and start to get an understanding of the total amount of calories and fat and other nutrients that you're actually consuming. Once you do this for a couple of weeks, you'll have covered a wide variety of food and you'll gain a very good understanding of what you're actually eating. And with that, it'll become much easier to pour out the food and have a good sense of what you're really consuming. So I'm not suggesting that you forever afterwards are measuring on a kitchen scale, but I want you to build that sense of knowing what it is that you actually eat. Now, if you find the suggested serving is just not satisfying, then maybe you should splurge less often and overindulge from time to time. But if it's just not worth it, then you gotta cut the cord and toss that food aside. Section 2 receives probably the most attention, and that is calories, because it is such a big determinant of whether you're going to gain or lose weight. And for most people, we suggest a 2,000 calorie diet, but that will vary on many factors. But for our purposes, let's stick with that typical 2,000 calorie diet. So for lunch, let's get a Big Mac, fries, and a Coke. And we'll see that we just tore through over 1,000 calories. We've consumed the better portion of what we should have for the day, and we've left little room for our breakfast and for our dinner. Calorie intake can easily get out of hand. If you're regularly consuming 2,500 calories, then within a week, you'll gain a pound. Now, if you aim to lose that, you need to have a calorie deficit of, say, 200 calories a day, and you drop down to 1,800 calories. It would take you over 2 weeks to now lose that pound. And it's not as easy as just decreasing 200 calories. Rather, you're having to drop from 2,500 down to 1,800. That's a 700 calorie deficit compared to what you've grown used to. And this is why weight loss can be so difficult to achieve and to maintain. A meal plan can help you to budget the calories that you should be having at each meal, to monitor where you're at and where you need to be. The third section is nutrients, and this will inform you how much you'll intake of each key nutrient, both in terms of an absolute amount and as a percentage of the recommended daily value. Some of these you want to be low, like saturated fat, trans fats, added sugars, and sodium. Others you want to be high, like proteins and vitamins. Your specific targets will depend on your diet plan, and for some medical conditions, you'll want to pay especially close attention to the potassium. Know that sugars and protein have 4 calories per gram, whereas fat has more than twice that, 9 calories per gram. We don't want to have too much saturated fat because that can drive your LDL, bad cholesterol, skyward. But don't totally discount fats. Unsaturated fats, particularly those from non-animal sources, are often good fats that have some good health benefits. Now remember, these numbers and percentages are based on a single serving. In this example, you get 25% of your daily calcium. So with 4 servings, you'd reach your calcium goal, but you would do so at the expense of having a lot of added sugar and way excessive amount of salt. In this beef jerky, there's 6 grams of added sugar and over a half gram of sodium. That's bad enough for a single serving, but if you get carried away and eat the better part of the bag, then you've had way in excess of the recommended amount of sodium that you should consume in a day, if not several days. When you consume high loads of any nutrient, it stresses your body. Your GI tract has to absorb all of that, and your liver, your pancreas, and your kidneys are going to have to process it downstream. And that's really taxing on your body. If that added sugar comes from high fructose corn syrup, then that massive load of fructose is going to flood the pumps that are responsible for absorbing fructose in your body. Unable to absorb all that excess amount, they're going to be carried downstream into your colon where they will wreak havoc of bloating and diarrhea. Large loads of sugars and fat stress your pancreas that's responsible for breaking those nutrients down so they can be digested and absorbed, and for your liver to process them and package them out for delivery to the rest of the body. Your liver, overwhelmed with all that work, will package excess sugars as fat and store it inside of itself, causing fatty liver disease. And your pancreas, stressed to the max trying to produce insulin, will eventually become diabetic. Reading and understanding these labels is at first time consuming and tedious, but you'll gain a lot of insight into what you're eating, and you'll start to learn those foods that are healthy and those that are toxic. And you can break up with those toxic foods. These were foods that you loved and you craved, and so leaving them, even though they're toxic, it can be difficult. But with time, your food feelings will mend. I hope this information helps you to decipher nutrition labels. Obviously, there's a ton of foods that have no label at all, and even with this information, it may be hard to know those that are best for you. So in future videos, we're going to cover some of the foods that are hyped up as being really healthy for you, but take a hard look at whether or not they actually are. Thank you for watching, and be safe.